In the summer of 1857, something happened on a Georgia plantation that made four powerful slave owners do the unthinkable. These were men who controlled hundreds of acres of land, dozens of enslaved people, and nearly every aspect of life around them. Yet all four signed a written agreement promising they would never approach a small cabin at the edge of a cotton field. Not because of violence, not because of disease, and not because anyone threatened them. The cabin belonged to an enslaved woman named Cora Rue, and what she built around that cabin terrified them in a way they could never fully explain. This is the forgotten story of the woman who created a boundary that power itself refused to cross. A world built on control. In the 1850s, Central Georgia was dominated by cotton plantations. The land was rich, the summers were brutal, and the entire economy depended on the labor of enslaved people. One of these plantations belonged to a man named Clement Harland. Harland wasn't known for dramatic cruelty. He didn't shout. He didn't make public spectacles. Instead, he controlled people through numbers. Everything was recorded in ledgers. Every task, every worker, every pound of cotton harvested. To him, human beings were entries on a page. And among those entries was a woman named Cora Rue. According to his records, she was approximately 38 years old and considered a productive worker. But the ledger left out everything that mattered. It didn't mention the family she had lost. It didn't mention the child taken from her and sold away. And it certainly didn't mention the knowledge she carried. Knowledge that would eventually challenge the authority of the men who believed they controlled everything. The cabin at the edge of the field. In the spring of 1856, Cora was assigned a small cabin near the southeastern edge of the plantation. Most people considered it a bad location. It was isolated, far from the other cabins, close to low, swampy ground where mosquitoes gathered at dusk. But Cora accepted the move without complaint, and almost immediately, she began transforming the land around her. At first, nobody paid attention. She planted herbs, medicinal plants, wildflowers, roots and shrubs. Nothing seemed unusual, but over time, people began noticing something strange. The air around the cabin felt different. Travelers passing the area spoke of an unusual scent. Not unpleasant, just impossible to describe. Some compared it to fresh earth after a storm. Others said it reminded them of cedar wood, herbs, and old church buildings. Whatever it was, people remembered it, and they couldn't stop thinking about it. The garden begins to grow. By autumn, the area surrounding Cora's cabin had become a dense garden. Medicinal plants grew in carefully arranged patterns. Some were common, others were unfamiliar. Certain flowers only opened after sunset and closed before sunrise. Dark leaf plants stretched across the soil in unusual formations. Even experienced gardeners struggled to identify everything growing there. One visitor became particularly disturbed by what she saw. A neighboring plantation owner's wife, Theodora Prout, had extensive knowledge of plants. After seeing Cora's garden, she sent a private letter to Clement Harland. In the note, she warned him that some of the plants were difficult to identify, and some she recognized but preferred not to discuss in writing. The message was brief, but it planted a seed of concern. Harland decided to investigate, a conversation that solved nothing. When Harland visited the cabin, he asked Cora about the garden. Her response was completely reasonable. Every plant had a purpose. Some helped with fevers. Others eased pain. Many were traditional remedies used throughout the South. Nothing appeared dangerous. Nothing violated any plantation rules. And the garden wasn't interfering with work. If anything, it seemed harmless. So Harland left. But something bothered him. The garden felt organized in a way he couldn't explain. It seemed to communicate something, a message he couldn't read. And over the following months, that feeling only grew stronger. The knowledge they didn't understand. Long before arriving at Harlan Plantation, Cora had learned from an elderly woman known as Mama Thistle. The woman possessed generations of botanical knowledge passed through families and communities. She understood plants, their healing properties, their symbolism, their hidden meanings. Over the years, Cora absorbed everything she could. After being sold to Harlan Plantation, she spent more than 2 decades studying local plants and learning what could thrive in Georgia's red clay soil. People began seeking her help. Mothers brought sick children. Workers came for remedies. Women sought advice and support. Her treatments often worked. And, slowly, she earned something powerful. Trust, not through force, not through authority, but through knowledge. And that trust would become more influential than any plantation ledger. The summer, everything changed. Then came the summer of 1857. A devastating drought hit the region. Crops suffered everywhere. Neighboring plantations struggled. Fields dried out. Harvest projections dropped. But something unusual happened near Cora's cabin. The cotton growing closest to her garden remained healthy. The soil held moisture better than surrounding areas. Plants thrived despite the harsh conditions. Workers noticed it. Owners noticed it, and nobody could fully explain it. Harlan searched for logical answers. Perhaps the area sat closer to underground water. Maybe the terrain created favorable conditions. But deep down, he knew the explanation wasn't that simple. The difference was too dramatic, too consistent, and too close to Cora's garden. The fear begins. Around the same time, reports started reaching Harlan. Workers claimed that Cora walked the perimeter of her garden late at night. She spoke quietly while moving among the plants. Nobody knew what she was saying. Nobody could hear the words. But stories spread. Soon neighboring plantation owners visited the area. Each experienced the same strange reaction. None wanted to enter the garden. There was no physical barrier, no threat, no warning sign. Yet they hesitated. They remained outside, watching, observing, unable to explain why crossing that invisible line felt wrong. One plantation owner later admitted he felt an overwhelming reluctance to step inside. Not fear exactly, something deeper, something harder to define, more than a garden. The real concern wasn't the plants. It was the people. Women from nearby plantations began visiting Cora. They came seeking remedies, advice, and knowledge. And when they returned home, something had changed. They weren't rebellious. They weren't breaking rules. But they carried themselves differently. More confident, more connected, as if they had remembered something important. The plantation owners noticed, and it made them uneasy, because influence was spreading, not through force, not through violence, but through relationships, through knowledge, through community, and they had no way to stop it. The moment of realization. Then several incidents occurred within days of one another. Women on neighboring plantations started planting similar herbs. Small gatherings appeared before dawn. Messages seemed to travel between communities without anyone understanding how. The plantation owners became increasingly alarmed. Finally, 4 of them met together. Clement Harlan, Randolph Sutter, Wesley Prout, Marcus Delavan, all powerful men, all accustomed to control, and all struggling with the same problem. Cora had created something beyond their reach. A network they couldn't monitor, a system they couldn't understand, a form of influence they couldn't measure. For men whose power depended on controlling information, that was deeply unsettling. The agreement. At the end of their meeting, they made an extraordinary decision. They agreed they would not approach Cora's cabin, not individually, not collectively, not for inspection, not for investigation, not for any reason. And they put the agreement in writing. Think about that. For plantation owners, signed a document acknowledging that there was a place on their land they would not enter, a place they effectively surrendered, not because they had been defeated by force, but because they had encountered something their authority could not reach, what they were really afraid of. The truth is that the men were never afraid of the plants. They were afraid of what the plants represented: knowledge, community, independence. Korah's garden proved that their control was not absolute. There were spaces beyond their understanding, relationships beyond their surveillance, forms of power that couldn't be measured in acreage, money, or ownership. Every visitor to the garden was evidence. Every herb planted elsewhere was evidence. Every conversation shared between women was evidence. Evidence that their system had limits. And limits are terrifying to people who believe they control everything. The legacy of Korah Rue. History doesn't tell us exactly what happened to Korah after emancipation. The records fall silent. Like so many formerly enslaved people, she disappears from official documents. But her garden remained. Years later, surveyors still noted unusual botanical growth near the old cabin, and the written agreement survived. A document signed by 4 powerful men. A document proving that one woman had created a space they would not enter. Not with weapons, not with wealth, not with political power, but with patience, knowledge, and an unshakable understanding of who she was. Ultra. The story of Korah Rue reminds us that power doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it isn't loud. Sometimes it isn't visible. Sometimes it grows quietly in the soil while nobody is paying attention. And by the time people notice it, it's already too strong to remove. So what do you think? Were the plantation owners afraid of the unknown? Or did they recognize that Korah had built something they could never truly control? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy forgotten stories of hidden history, resilience, and extraordinary people who changed the world in unexpected ways, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because history often hides its most powerful stories in the places nobody thinks to look.